Hello students, today we're going to look at 6-1 and it's the slope-intercept form. Now you'll remember that the last video you watched had to do with finding the slope or the rate of change using either rise over run or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And you also remember, and I really didn't focus on this, but slope is represented in an equation with the letter m. And so when we talk about slope-intercept form, we have to know the slope of the line and the y-intercept. And the y-intercept is represented as b, so the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. And the x and y are points on the line that fit into the equation to make the equation true. Okay? So anytime we have slope-intercept form, y has to be by itself, and then mx plus b. The slope is always the coefficient or the number attached to x. And the y-intercept is always the number that does not have a variable on the same side as the x. Okay? mx, m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. So today we're going to look at how we would write those equations and how we would graph those equations. So let's look at the first example, y equals 4x minus 1. Part of what you need to do is you need to figure out what is the y-intercept and what is the slope. So for this one, m is 4 because it is attached to the x. 4 is attached to the x. Now I might want to write it 4 over 1, which would be a good idea because when we start rise over run and graphing, we need to have a rise and a run for that. And b, which is the y-intercept, is -1 because it's -1. Now I'm not sure who in the world came up with b to stand for y-intercept. Doesn't make sense to me either. That's just unfortunately what it is. Okay? So the slope is 4 over 1. The y-intercept is -1. Now sometimes we're given an equation that doesn't start with y equals, like 4x minus 2y equals 8. In the occasion of 4x minus 2y equals 8, we've got to solve the equation for y first. Okay? So when we solve this equation for y, I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides to get it out of the way. So I have -2y equals -4x plus 8. Notice I did something there. Typically we would do 8 minus 4x, but when we want it in y-intercept form, I want the x to come first. The x is -4, so it's -4x plus 8. Now I'm going to divide everything by -2, and that leaves y equals -4 divided by -2 is positive 2x, and 8 divided by -2 is -4. Okay, -4 divided by -2 is positive 2x, and 8 divided by -2 is -4. And so now my slope is positive 2, and my y-intercept is -4. And once again, with that slope, you might want to put it over 1 to have that rise over run for when we graph these later. So anytime you're given an equation and they ask you for it in slope-intercept form, you have to get y by itself. Now what if we're given some crazy equation like this, 3x plus 2y equals 2x plus 8, and it asks me to write the equation in slope-intercept form? Well, first I've got to get all my x's on the same side. And when we were solving equations with variables on the both sides, I always told you to start with the variable that was the smallest. Well, in this case, if we started with the smallest variable, my x's would end up on the same side as y, and I don't want that to happen because I've got to get y by itself. So in this case, I'm going to do SADMEP basically. I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides so that I can start getting y by itself. So I have 2y equals 2 minus 3 is -x plus 8. Now you'll remember 2 minus 3 is -1, but we don't have to put the 1 there. You can if you want to. Doesn't matter. It may help you, but you don't have to. Now I need to divide everything by 2. So in this case, y equals negative 1/2 x, because that's a negative 1 and it's over 2, plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I've got y equals negative 1/2 x plus 4. Now it's going to ask me to graph that. So how in the world would I graph it? I don't have a coordinate plane, but you do. I gave you copies of the coordinate plane. So will you cut out one of those coordinate planes and will you tape it right here so that we can graph it? Or if you want to just graph it right now and then you can tape it in later to save time and not have to pause. Okay? When I graph these, I always start with b. We know that b is positive 4, so positive 4 is right there. It's the y-intercept, so that is where my line is going to cross the y-axis. Okay? I want to start there. And now my slope is negative 1/2. So I can choose the 1 to be negative or the 2 to be negative. It doesn't matter. They're just both not negative. So to do that, I would go, and let me just draw the tick marks. I would go, I'm going to use the 1 as negative. I'm going to go down 1 and to the right 2, and there's my point, although that's kind of off on the 2. So it's going to go right there. And then I can go down 1 and across 2, and it's going to be about right there. Now I could make the 2 negative, and I could go up 1 and to the left 2, and it would be about right there. And then I would draw my line with a ruler, and there's the line that's graphed y equals negative 1/2 x plus 2. Okay? If I want to verify the slope, I just pick a bottom point. I go up 1 and to the left 2, which would make my slope negative 1/2. Now sometimes they give us some information about the line and they want us to come up with the equation for it. So in this case, they tell me that the line passes through the point 2, 1 and has a slope of negative 2. Okay? So that's some information that I can use. I know my equation is going to end up as y equals mx plus b. And let's fill in what we know to this equation. Okay? I know that my slope is negative 2, so that's going to go where m is. Now, they don't tell me what the y-intercept is, so I've got to find that. But they do give me an x and a y that I can plug into the equation. Well, the y value is 1, so I could say 1 equals, and then the x value is 2, so I could put that where the x is. And here I'm finding out what b equals. So I just plugged in everything they gave me. They gave me a point, which is an x and a y, and they gave me the slope, so I can plug it in the slope. Now let's solve for b. 1 equals negative 4 plus b. Add 4 to both sides. b equals 5. So now I know that my slope is 2 and my y-intercept is 5. So my equation must be y equals negative 2x plus 5. Again, I'm taking all of the information they give me, plugging it into the y equals mx plus b equation, and solving for the unknown. Then I can write my equation in slope-intercept form. Just for a quick review, let's graph one more equation that's already in slope-intercept form to see if we can master that. Okay? So I have y equals 2x minus 1, and I know that m equals 2, and I know that b equals negative 1. Okay? Again, I always start with my y-intercept when I'm graphing. My y-intercept is negative 1, so I'm going to go to the y-axis to negative 1, and that's the first point on my line. So when I use the slope, I'm going to start at that point that's already on my line. I don't go back to the origin. I start at the point that I already have on my line. And now I know my slope is 2. But what does rise over run? All I have is 2. Well, how do you make a whole number fraction? You put it over 1. So the rise over run is 2 over 1. So from this, I would go up 2 and to the right 1. And there's another point on my line. And then I could do it again because remember in this class we have to have 3 points. So I go up 2 more from here, up 2 and to the right 1. And there's my third point. Now, I should have said this at the beginning. You have a piece of graph paper, so graph this on here and then tape it in. Okay? and then I would draw my line with arrows on both ends, and that is the graph of the equation y equals 2x minus 1. And finally, students, the moment you've all been waiting for, your practice problems. You have 3 practice problems tonight, and here they are. Write an equation in slope-intercept form. 1, if the slope is 2/3 and the y-intercept is -2. 2, if the standard form of the equation is 5x plus 3y equals 9. Remember, what you have to do is get y by itself. Okay? And the third one is the slope is -4 and it passes through the points 2, 3. So you'll start with your y-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, plug in what you know, find what you don't, and write the equation. All of these answers will be in y equals mx plus b form. Make sure to take a picture of your practice problems and submit it using the turn-in button in Edmodo, and feel free to email me or Edmodo message me if you have any questions.